You're watching Training Camp with Adam Marburger, exclusively on CBT News.
Welcome to Training Camp, exclusively on CBT News. I'm your host, Adam Marburger. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a black belt in F&I. This show's designed to help automotive professionals enhance their operations to ultimately achieve their rank of black belt. I'm here today with a dear friend, an actual mentor of mine. He's a regular here on the show, best-selling author, Vice President of the Kelly Automotive Group. I'm here with my dear friend, Chris Saraceno.
Well, thank you for the invite. I was very excited when we talked about meeting each other and doing this.
Yeah, well, I always have fun chatting it up with you. So I'm going to get right to this. What's new at Kelly? You guys, I see you guys online. You guys are in acquisition mode. You're always doing new things. What's happening? What's new with Kelly?
Well, we opened a Hyundai store in Stroudsburg, and we think Hyundai's a great franchise.
Oh, yeah.
They just keep growing. We're growing people. We're spending time with leadership training right now behind the scenes. And I've had people question, well, you do leadership training on your own. Why don't you do it? I think you always need people from the outside to come in. You need people outside to challenge you on what you're doing or not doing because you have those blind spots sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. We can say things over and over and we feel we're saying them the right way. But when somebody else says it, they take a little more action on it. I don't know. It's a beautiful thing, right?
Well, sort of like mom and dad. As sometimes when someone else says it to a child, they listen more than their mom and dad after many years when they're teenagers.
Yeah, you've had a really incredible career. I mean, from being a national trainer, one of two of Saturn, you did some big things there. You've written several books, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. You run a very, very large organization. So throughout your career within your organization, what is one of the biggest success stories that you've seen from an individual? Anything come to mind that you've seen that you would like to maybe share?
I mean, I've been doing this since 1984. So I've met people that were in sales that now own their own dealership. We actually hired somebody in our company years ago, a young woman named Lori that was a teacher, and then she ended up becoming her own dealer. So there's nothing that makes you more proud when you see somebody that you hired. They weren't sure if they wanted to do this, and 10 or 15 years later, they end up becoming a dealer.
You're a mentor to a lot of people in this industry.
Well, thank you.
And in your book, you talk about mentors. You talk about anti-mentors. You talk about mentors. If you could, I'm going to throw something at you here. So I'm going to throw you off here. I'm not afraid to do this, by the way. You're my friend. So if you could have lunch or dinner with anyone in retail automotive, past, unfortunately no longer with us, or currently with us, who would that be and why?
Two names come to probably Jim Moran, because he's such a big name in the business, and there's a gentleman named Terry Taylor. With AMSI. And I know he's from the Florida market, started in Daytona, but he has done such an incredible job, and the general managers that are his partners just rave about working with him. So I would say those would be in the past and somebody in the present.
That's awesome.
Those would be the two people I'd like to have dinner with and lunch and talk about business.
I love that. Yeah, two incredible names. Yes. I would love to join you in that dinner. There'll be a lot of wisdom shared. So when you were let's go back to middle school. Let's go to middle school, maybe freshman year, sophomore year in high school. What did Chris Saraceno want to do with his living then? What was the idea? Where was your path headed at that point?
Well, I would say in junior high, I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and that disappeared when I was with a friend that was a year or two older than me, and the car in front of me ran over a dog, and when I saw the dog how it was hit, I thought, I really love dogs, but I don't think I want to operate on them. And then as I got older, I really got into wrestling, and I wrestled from second grade through my freshman year in college. I really wanted to be a teacher and a coach, a wrestling coach. So that was really my passion. But back in the 80s, you had a lot of colleges discourage you, and they say, we have too many teachers right now. So that's why I went into marketing and communications.
Yeah. So you're real big into personal development. I mean, it's a big part of your life. When did that start, though? I mean, because there's typically something that happens whether it's personally in your life, professionally in your life, there's just something that clicks and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go all in. What was that for you? Have you been like that your entire life? Or is it something you picked up more as when you became a working professional?
Well, my mom and Dad would always tell me that I worked hard. I would go to practice wrestling and come home and practice more. And I always wanted to go to camps, and I always wanted to meet somebody that if there was a local coach, I wanted to try to meet them and be invited over to wrestling in the summer. So I think it was sort of natural. I wrote down my goals ever since I was 12 years old, and nobody told me to do it. But I would guess, probably subconsciously, my first wrestling coach in second grade or third grade, he's the one that first told me the statement, iron sharpens iron.
Oh, yeah.
And then later on I found it was from the Bible. But I think that mindset has always been with me to do that. And then when I started in the car sales, I would just naturally look at it and say, who's doing the best here? And ask questions. And I would sit next to them as they were sitting talking to customers, and I would afterwards say, so Murray, why did you ask this question? What was the mindset behind it? What were you hoping to achieve? Or I would say, I think if you talked to that customer that I didn't sell, I think you would have sold them. Here's what they said. How would you have handled that? So I was always asking questions. I was natural to do that because I think it was part of sports. If you saw somebody, you do jiu-jitsu, but if someone had a move that you liked, you'd say, then walk me through that.
Yeah.
What you did and why. What can we try that a couple times over? And that's how I approached business. I just approached it by... my mom would tell me that I was very lucky that I naturally had friends, and I believe I assumed that everybody wanted to be my friend.
Yes.
So I think if you have that internally and say, I like that person, he has a good mindset, that person's going to be my friend.
Yep. And I'm going to speak to my audience here for a minute. So, when I speak on this show, I talk about having an indestructible morning routine filled with non-negotiables, with a plan for the day, with a positive mindset, and making sure you're rolling with those that are doing more than you. And so, Chris, when I read your book several years ago, there were a lot of things that came true. We've got similarities in our stories, and it really, really impacted my life. So let me ask you this question too, because I think a lot of people in retail automotive, I think a lot of sales managers, finance managers, salespeople, heck, you find executive managers, even GMs sometimes. They show up to work to kind of wing it. Not in your organization, not in any of mine, but out there in the masses, right? Some people just kind of wing it. How important is it to have just a structured, dialed-in morning routine? And if you don't mind sharing yours, I'm putting you on the spot again.
Okay.
So I'd like you to share with everybody, what does Chris Saraceno do in the morning to set up for a day of excellence?
Well, it's changed over the decades. So I would say when I was in my 20s through 40s, I would get up at 4 o'clock and start working out at 4:30. And that started with a gentleman that I admired. He was sort of a local celebrity in our area. There was a big amusement park called Dorney Park in the Lehigh Valley. And he owned this. He hung out with guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger when they would visit, when they were doing bodybuilding. And he invited me to come work out with him. And it was really an honor if you got to go work out with this gentleman, because he was well known, worked out. And he said, most people won't make it more than 2 weeks with me. They just can't handle it. And we worked out together for 10 years, every morning at 4:30. If you didn't show up, if you were late, he's saying don't show up. And I think that set the discipline. So I would say that I did that up until my 40s. Then I moved it to like 5. And now that I'm in my 60s, it's my routine. I'm up around 5:30, but I start my workout around 6.
Sleep's a good thing.
So it's changed slightly over the years.
Yeah. So one thing, I'm going to ask one final question. What advice would you give to that young, 21-year-old, 25-year-old that wants to dabble in personal growth, dabble in personal development? They're not doing anything yet, but they know deep down they kind of want to do something. Yeah. What can you say to help kind of position them to get in that right direction?
Well, first of all, you have to understand yourself, and then you have to believe that you need it. Because if you think you don't need it, you're not going to listen to it. But today it's so easy, just like the program we have right now. There are people that are watching this right now that are probably in their 20s and 30s and say, I can learn from these gentlemen. And ask. Look at somebody that you say, I like the way they think. I like their actions. I like what they have accomplished. And what's the worst that can happen if you call them up or you reach out to them and you want to talk to them and ask them questions? Most people say yes. And I believe that the older you get, the more you want to help, especially if you've had a good life. You want to help other people. I was just talking to the jiu-jitsu gentleman that's going to be here.
My coach Kyle.
Coach Kyle, and I was just saying to him, I said, the benefit you have right now is when you see somebody younger and hungry, and you get a certain age, it inspires you. I know you and I are about 20 years apart, but I will tell you that when you see that youth and that excitement, there's nothing I like more than I see some young man or woman enter our industry and I see the hunger in their eye. And it makes me want to be around them. But when you're young, you don't realize that somebody that's older, that you're inspiring them just by your motivation and the fact that you're open to learning and you want to grow. And when you see people like that, it inspires you in sports, but it also inspires you in business and in life in general, being that it's being a better husband, a better father, better spiritually, better in finance and saving money. All those areas of your life, when you see somebody that's hungry and wants to grow and you see their growth. Part of the reason I keep in touch with you is because I see your hunger and I see how you're always pushing and you're out there and you don't stop. And you know what? That helps feed other people doing that.
Amen. Amen. So I always love talking to you. You've been such a great mentor to me. You're a mentor to so many people in the industry. Thank you for all of your contributions. And always, as always, thanks for joining us here at Training Camp.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you greatly. So
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining another episode of Training Camp exclusively on CBT News. Remember, if nothing changes, nothing changes. We must take action in our stores and be willing to invest into training. See, training is not something that we did, it's something that we must do, and we must do it on a continuous basis. My final sound off is this: fights are never won in the ring. They're not won in the cage. They're won in training camp. So let's get to work, my friends.
Thanks for watching Training Camp with Adam Marburger, exclusively on CBT News.